When people ask what is the best Claude model for their business, they expect one clear answer. And they usually assume Opus because it's the smartest and most expensive one. But there isn't really a single best model for all use cases. And using Opus for everything is the fastest way to burn money. I've been building AI systems for dozens of businesses over the last year, and picking the right model for the job is what I do every single day. So in this video, I want to break down the exact use cases where you would use Opus, Haiku, Sonnet, and even Fable if it was out. So you can always pick the right Claude model so you don't overpay. Let's get into it. All right, so there are two different jobs that you will use in Claude for your business, and each one costs you money in different ways. So the first one is building a system. So this is something like setting up a new automation for your business. So this is building a system. The other one is running the system. So this is the actual automation running itself. So we need to use credits to build a system, and we need to use credits to run the system. The reason why this is important is because building the system can be so much more complicated than actually running the system. A good example of this is if I built out an AI customer support agent, it will usually take a lot of tokens and time to build that system because we're building it from the ground up. Now, for actually running the system, there isn't really much complexity there. It's just seeing the question and finding the right answer within a database. I'll get more into why this is important later on. So before I really explain what model is best for what, let's first go over where the three models differ when it comes to power, cost, and speed. In general, the more powerful a model is, the more complex the work it can handle, but the more it costs to run and at a slower speed. Opus is the most powerful, not talking about Fable. Let's ignore Fable for now, or Mythos, mainly because at the time of this recording, Fable and Mythos recently came out being so much better than Opus, being able to one-shot so many different automations, apps, and different builds. But for just the purpose of this video, we're not going to be talking about Mythos and Fable because, you know, it's not existing right now. Maybe it'll be out whenever this video is live or people's watching it. Okay, but right now, Opus is the strongest model, and it can handle very well complexity, high complexity, lower speed, but higher cost. Next, we have Haiku. And this is something that I really loved about Anthropic's models. And honestly, I love how Claude named each of their different models because you could really tell its complexity based off the name. So a haiku, as you might know from English class, is a 3-line type of poetry. And Opus is like the big masterwork of something incredibly complex but takes a long time to do. So it's really cool that you can almost tell the complexity and the speed of each of the models based off the name if you understand, like, you know, creative works in poetry. So in any case, Haiku has complexity a lot lower, speed much higher, and cost much lower. And right in between the complexities of Opus and the simplicity of Haiku, we have a sonnet, which is kind of this balanced 14-line poem. So it's not a masterwork like an Opus, but it's also not a quick 3-liner like a haiku. And kind of here we just find the exact middle, right? We have a complexity of just meh, and you have a speed of meh and a cost. Now, this is where you can almost start to imagine where each of these models would integrate within the automations and agents we build for businesses. So let's start with understanding Opus, because this is honestly the one that we're going to be using the most, especially when we build out these automations and agents for our clients. So use cases with Opus, let's start with building, which is the first job, and this is the one place you always want to start, and you always want to use Opus no matter the cost. So by building, what I really mean is creating the automations and agents. When you build a complex system, like automations and agents, you need Claude to build out a plan to put this system together. It needs to be able to work with you in all of the complexity to find out where all the moving parts connect with each other, so we actually get an outcome for the business. And when we're going through that plan and something breaks, we want a model that can handle complexity well. That way we find a good solution fast. Building something out like an automation or an agent, there is a lot to reason at once. And this is exactly why we use Opus for the job. Overall, we're able to hold so much more detail at the same time and work through the most complicated problems that models like Sonnet and Haiku can't exactly handle. Now, moving on, the thing about building is that building only happens once, right? So we only build once. So when we build out the infrastructure, like let's say here's our agent, and we have all the moving parts inside of here, this goes here, this does this does this. We don't need 30 of these every single day. We build out one agent, we build out one automation, and it works over and over and over again. So paying for this highest model is most important when we're trying to build the engine that will last the long term. Just pasting inside of here, you could take a look at my content agent, as well as my landing page agent. So I just put 2 agents inside of here. And inside of the content agent, you can see that I have folders that contain content, context, different clients, directives, executions that will connect to different tools, as well as skills and tools itself. So you can see that there are so many different elements that needed to be generated by the agent that will work whenever I use it. But because I'm only building it one time, I don't really care too much about the credits being used here. Same thing for the landing page agent, so much knowledge, run, schemas, scripts. All of these needs to be generated by something that can handle complexity. Now, another piece that's really important here, and the reason why Opus is incredibly powerful is because Opus comes out of your Claude plan. So if you have the Pro plan or the Max plan, even if you have the beginner plan, you're still able to use Opus. The cool thing about Opus as well is because it's under your Pro or Max plan, or I guess the free plan as well, you don't really need to worry too much about the credits being spent because we can use Opus within Claude's ecosystem. By the way, if you're a business owner and you're not sure what to automate, I do free AI audits that go over how you're doing things day to day, and I can help you see what's currently being done manually and what we can automate. If you're interested, I'll leave a link at the top of the description below where you can book a call. Anyways, let's keep going. All right, so now that we've covered building and using Opus, let's move on to the second job. So this is actually running the system once it's live. All right, so now that we've covered building, let's talk about the second job. So this is actually running the system. Now, whenever you need to run a system, normally this is a system that's already built by Opus. This system is going to be running every single day over and over and over again, using so many credits. And most of the time, the systems that we build are only doing pretty menial tasks. Now, whenever we build something like, let's say, an auto emailer, we don't need Opus creating this copy. So a lot of times something like an auto emailer that only needs to generate copy. Now the copy still needs to be good and we're still going to be using context. This means that we should be using Sonnet. So overall, the main thing we want inside of a live system is the cheapest model that will still do the job well. Now Opus might be able to write an email that's significantly better, but the difference between a 90% email and an 80% email, it's not much. So we'd rather save some money on the back end by using the model that's faster and cheaper. So an example of this, very similar, I'm gonna paste it in from NAN. This is a quick automation. So Sonnet, based off this API call, will read the room and write the reply. So if there is a sample inbound email, we want Sonnet to draft a reply for that. Now the thing about Sonnet is that it's still a very good copywriter and it's able to make some genuinely good judgments. And because so many inbound emails can come every single day, we save significantly more money and tokens by running this on Sonnet instead of something like Opus. Now, for steps that are even simpler than Sonnet, this is where we would use Haiku. So Haiku is, again, Anthropic's fastest model. And the whole point of this is that Haiku is just built for simple, repetitive jobs that it's going to run constantly, but barely need any time for thinking. So these are steps where there's an obvious right answer. So maybe places where there's like a break, where there's right versus wrong. And there's not really any point of spending too much time thinking about it. It's almost as if I asked you a question and you know the answer instantly. That's the purpose of Haiku. Still making decisions, but most of the time the answer is already there. So things like this could be sorting leads into categories, or routing a message to the right place, or pulling details from a form. The main way to think about Haiku is that we're mainly using this to automate steps, not necessarily the entire system. But whenever something comes up where we need maybe a bit more complex copy to be written or a judgment call, this is where we'd call Sonnet or Opus. I'll paste in another automation that we have built out here. And you can see here that in this automation, we're going to be using the Haiku API key, and it's really just routing. So we parse an inbound message, and we're not trying to write a response or anything like that, but we're just taking the category. So we're going to look at the inbound message, Haiku is going to read it, realize what category it's based off of, then route to either the sales team, or is this a support question, or spam, or fallback. Something like routing messages is something where Haiku really shines, and it will barely use any of your tokens. Now, if you're gonna remember one thing from this entire video, just make it this. So you wanna match the model to how hard the step actually is. You don't need to pay for the power for a step that runs over and over. You wanna match your complexity. If you get that right, you're gonna end up working with systems that work great at the lowest cost possible. Now, knowing which model to use is one thing, but building all of this into automations and agents that actually drive revenue within your business is another. So if you'd rather just skip all that and have me build it for you, click the first link in the description and book a call with me for a free automation audit. And I'll ask you questions to figure out what you're doing manually in your business to find out what can be automated. From there, I'll build you a clear plan so you know what is best to build first and the ROI you get from building it. So again, you could book that free audit in the link down below. And if you want to know what are all the best tools right now for automating your business, check this video out right here.